Welcome to Happily Ever After is just the beginning. Keeping your relationship not just together, but happy, and we mean truly happy, is part art and part science.
There were days where we thought we wouldn't make it out, but we stuck it out. Today's our day.
You've come to the right place.
Today's our day.
Here's your host, Leslie Dories.
I hear a lot of things from couples that really hurt my heart and oftentimes just make me want to cry. There are things that I hear that also make me want to scream inside and make me want to jump up and down and just, shake my fists. But there's one thing that I hear that actually gives me both responses. So, have you ever heard, or worse, maybe said, I love my partner, I'm just not in love with them anymore? Arg! It's often seen as an inevitable fact of being married for any length of time, and it's also a statement of settling for a less than marriage. So what it really is an acknowledgement that intimacy has faded. And as somebody who just celebrated their 31st wedding anniversary, I can tell you that it doesn't have to be that way. And to help me explain that to you and help you find a way back to each other, I'm joined by Jeff Forte. He's an executive and peak performance coach. He's the founder of Peak Results Coaching. And more importantly, at least for me, he's the author of The 90-Minute Marriage Miracle. And so we're going to talk today about the importance of intimacy in marriage and how you can revive it in yours. So, Jeff, thank you so much for coming on and talking about this really important topic.
Leslie, it's great to be with you, and I really, really appreciate your enthusiasm. And congrats, 31 years, that's awesome.
Yeah, so far he hasn't thrown me out yet, or me him. And I do think that there's a lot of people who think, there's the joke about, marriage is the place where sex goes to die, which is, that's not true. I mean, and actually, and you probably know this, that the research shows that married couples not only have more sex, but they also have better sex. But I know when we're talking about intimacy, we're not just talking about sex and the physical part of intimacy. And one of the reasons why I really wanted to have you on the show is because you wrote a recent article called 8 Elements of Intimacy and What You Need to Do to Get It Back. And in the article you wrote, and I love this, I love what you said, intimacy is the actualized aliveness of love in the relationship. It demonstrates deep caring. Without it, partners will feel empty and neglected. It's like this resonated with me so much. So can you elaborate a little bit on how you came to this, what this actually means?
Yes. I want your audience to know that I come to the relationship world from a different perspective, and the reason I do the work that I do is because I had a failed marriage 24 years ago. My first marriage lasted 5 years, and I really was pretty clueless looking in hindsight about it. My dad left when I was 15 years old, so I didn't have a great role model for the male figure in a relationship, and in my experience, most of us really don't. We don't tend to see high levels of intimacy, high levels of joy in our parents or role models. And so if we don't see it, how are we going to figure it out? So my wife and I now have been together 18 years, a second marriage, and I had this thought, what's possible between two people? What's really possible if one person is absolutely committed, the other person is committed at whatever level, but committed? What's possible? And the only answer that I've been able to come up with so far is that there seems to be no end to the elevation and improvement of affection, closeness, the deep feelings of being understood and getting each other. So right, intimacy,
which is why a lot of us get married in the first place, is because we have that, we're experiencing that in the moment, which is yay, and we want it to continue, or that's what we're looking for.
Yes. And what I didn't realize in the failure of my first marriage was a result of me thinking, okay, I'm married now. I'm good. I don't have to do anything. We're good.
Right.
We're going to live happily ever after.
We're going to live happily ever after. Right. And then
I don't
what?
have to do anything special where you take each other for granted. You know, there's this thing I call benign neglect where we don't intend to neglect our partner. We just do. Something else becomes more important. And that's the pretty typical pattern.
I call it the squeaky wheel. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a typical pattern that we see. And so for me, what I realized trying to figure out my own marriage issues early on with my wife was that if I didn't feel connected with her, what was I doing in the relationship? To me, this connection is an aspect of intimacy, this feelings of closeness. Mm-hmm. And so if you're walking on eggshells around your partner or you don't feel comfortable to be yourself around them, why are you in the relationship?
Good question.
So the actualized aliveness for me in the relationship is the feeling, right? The feeling of chemistry, the feeling of deep connection, the feeling of closeness, togetherness, the desire to be in each other's presence, to touch each other in any number of ways, not just sexually, but just to these affectionate, a back rub, to a hug. And everybody out there knows the difference between being held and being hugged, right? That lingering touch creates another element of improvement in the physical connection.
Right, and the physical connection leads to deeper emotional, intellectual connection too. To me, that's intimacy is more than just. People talk about intimacy. Oh, you're talking about sex. No, sex is part of it.
Right.
But it's so much bigger than that. And so you have 8 elements.
Yes.
And so let's just start with the first couple.
Sure.
So what are these 8 elements and why and why?
Well, the first element is affection and physical touch. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned to me that's a really important element because if there isn't any affection, if there isn't any physical touch in the relationship, I may have a great friendship, but there's absolutely nothing special. And in fact, in any of these 8 elements, if they're missing, the relationship becomes more roommates. And in my opinion, that's not my goal. That's not what I want, and that's not what I want for people. I don't want anybody out there who's in an intimate, long-term relationship to feel like they're just roommates with their partner, and that exists too often today. So affection and physical touch are important. Mm-hmm. And the second one is the feelings of closeness, the feelings of connection and togetherness. You want to feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself, that this person that you're with brings some additional dynamic into your life that you're never going to get on your own. And so those are the beginnings of what to me appears to be the important elements of intimacy that create this special uniqueness between two people.
Well, and I really like the focus on the second one because, my husband and I actually really like being with each other. We really enjoy it. We enjoy each other's company, and we'll do things with each other that. If we were by ourselves, we might not do, but because my husband's interested in this, I go along. Because I'm interested in this, he goes along. And then we've learned, sure, I enjoy this. Left on my own, I never would have done this. And that's part of that wanting to be together, and then the shared experience, of course, is a huge part of keeping relationships together.
I'm reminded of this feelings of closeness, connection, and togetherness. A lot of couples don't really enjoy spending time with each other. And my wife and I love to spend time with each other. We spend a great deal of time together. In fact, I prefer to go out to dinner with her alone than I do with other couples. And this is a kind of a fascinating thing that I observe is that often couples cannot go someplace by themselves.
Yeah, I frequently, because my husband and I do that too, we'll go out to dinner, and I'm looking at other couples in the restaurant, and I want to be throwing my cards on the table. It's like, okay, it doesn't have to be this way, the awkward silences, and, it's oh gosh, what's the movie with Steve Carell and Julianne Moore?
Oh, I know the one you're talking about.
Where they're having dinner, and their weekly dinner, and it's she wants a divorce, and
right.
It's like Okay, so what's number 3? What's the third one?
So warmth and tenderness towards each other. So when we exude warmth, genuine feelings of compassion, feelings of this radiant happiness around each other, being tender towards each other, right? So if to recognize in each other whatever is going on in that particular moment. Perhaps there's stress, perhaps there's pain, perhaps there's something going on in each other that we're not even aware of. Usually couples who've been together for any even reasonable period of time can tell in an instant the mood of their partner just by observing them, or even a phone call, the first hello. Right? Usually you can tell what's going on. Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly right. However, when life has really become more hectic than ever with technology, and so often people re-engage with each other in a distracted state.
Yep.
So there is no feeling of warmth or tenderness towards each other. We're not focused on our partner. We're focused in our own thoughts, or we're focused and distracted by some technology.
Right, because, I have both of my children, they're actually now adults. They've grown up in this, technological age, and the whole, fear of missing out. If they're not connected on Facebook or Instagram or whatever they happen to be, they're going to miss out. And it's like, yeah, but you're missing out what's going on right in front of you. And I think that's really happening a lot with couples.
It is. In fact, I urge couples not to text each other at all, other than, little insignificant things like pick me up some eggs at the store, what time we're going to get our children, and, I'll be home at 9:30.
Right, yeah,
or a little I love you, or a little
yeah.
Playful, wait till I get home, with some emoji of some sort.
Right.
But other than that, people tend to argue and try to resolve things by text. It's a disaster.
Oh, I know. I tell people it's like, some couples can pull it off, but most couples, because all you have is the words, even if you do emojis, which thank goodness those exist, but even then, arguing through text or trying to resolve an issue through text it's a minefield, because all you have is the words. You don't have facial expression, tone. You can't touch each other. You can't reach out and touch and be supportive or whatever. So what's number 4?
Number 4 is sensuality and sexual activity, which actually should be last, so I want to wait on that.
Okay.
They weren't in any particular order
right.
In the article, but then it's deep conversations, feeling understood and valued. And the only way to feel valued, right, we all have kind of our own unique rules. What has to happen in order for me to feel valued? What has to happen in order for me to feel understood? The practical thing that has to happen is somebody's got to be paying close attention to me, right?
Yes, and for a period of time.
Exactly, not for a nanosecond, or as I used to do with my remote when my wife would want to talk to me. I'm watching a game and she wants to talk to me, and I'm turning my head back and forth, and that is absolutely not feeling valued.
Exactly, and so that brings that brings up when couples should make the time, because sometimes it is make the time. We're one of the bywords of today is I'm so busy. Well, if you're too busy to take care of your marriage, you talked about benign neglect, it will end. Nothing thrives on neglect, including love. But this idea of actually being present and paying attention and making time to do that, because I tell people you need to be spending minimum 15 to 20 minutes a day in conversation, because the first 3 to 5 minutes is simply superficial stuff. But if you're still talking after 20 minutes, now we're connecting. Now we're talking on a deeper level. Now I'm hearing you. I'm present. I'm not trying to watch the baseball game or the football game around your shoulders or The Bachelor or whatever it happens to be, because it's not just guys who get stuck on stuff.
Yes, this is absolutely true. And Facebook seems to be the preferred place for women to distract themselves away from their husbands these days. At least that's a big complaint that I get. One of the things that I do tell people, though, is that if you time, right? Everybody has this shortage of time. At least it's a big complaint. I've even had couples tell me they can't find the time to talk with me to fix their marriage. So that shows their level of commitment. But time isn't a factor if somebody is truly committed. And I tell people that the idea is, can you stop time with your partner? Can you make time stand still? And let me give you an example of what I mean by that. I came home one day, not too long ago, maybe a month ago, and my wife is in a frenzy. She's trying to take our son someplace, and she can't find her car keys. And I just happen to walk in the door. And so I'm just the observer to her stressed-out pace because she's running late. And so she finds her car keys, and she is striding by me. And I grab her, and I sweep her down, and I give her a kiss, and I say, "I love you, beautiful." And she starts giggling. Her complete mood changes, and she goes out the door. That took 2 or 3 seconds.
Absolutely.
So I was able to stop time, and this is why I want people to understand the stop time concept. You can do that any day, all day. You don't need time. It's that moment where you connect in a special way.
I love it. This is Happily Ever After is just the beginning on webtalkradio.net. I'm Leslie Dories, and I'm talking with executive coach and author Jeff Forte about the importance of intimacy to a healthy marriage and how you can increase it in yours. So if you're struggling in this area, then I invite you to take action right now. Do not wait another minute. Pick up the phone and give me a call or send me an email at Leslie, Leslie, at foundationscoachingnc.com. That's FOUNDATIONS, coaching, N as in Nancy, C as in Charlie.com, or call me at 919-924-0463, because your relationship, you don't have to be roommates. You can get the excitement back into your relationship. You can reignite the passion if you want to. We're talking about, are you committed to doing this? Because anything less is less than what you deserve. So, and as you just heard Jeff say, it doesn't have to take a lot. Sweep your partner off their feet. I love that idea, Jeff. I think that's absolutely wonderful, because people can change their mood in an instant. I mean, I know sometimes I'll be having a really crappy day, and my husband will come home, and he'll make a comment like that to me. He'll say something about, hey, beautiful, or whatever. And, I'll both roll my eyes and smile at the same time. And I'll say something, and he goes, yeah, but I made you smile, didn't I? And it's like, yes, you did. And you can really switch moods that quickly if you're open to it.
Oh, this is absolutely true. The next one is this presence that we've talked about. Presence, compassion, empathy. For any men who are listening to this, your presence with your wife is essential in order for her to even begin to feel safe, to feel trusted, and certainly to feel valued. Your distracted presence begins to erode trust, begins to erode connection. We don't naturally recognize that as men. Right, because as men and women sometimes I think are different species. I mean, we do process things very, very differently, and being able to understand that there's nothing wrong with my partner just needs something different than I do, and being willing, and I think that's that empathy piece. And it goes both ways, because I think women can get pretty frustrated with their guys and not fully understand that men want to make women happy,
they just don't necessarily know that the way they're doing it or they're going about it isn't that. But I do love this presence, both. And I do think that kids can create a problem. Now, as I said, I have two. They're grown now. But, it's really easy to distract with kids. And I think that's where women can sometimes Facebook children, that it's easier to be with their children than it is to try to help their husbands learn how they work.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. As you know, in any highly successful and highly intimate relationship, the partners have to be a priority for each other over their children. And the other reason for that is you want to model something special for your children.
Well, that's what you were saying at the very beginning, that you didn't see that. And I do think that that's what a lot of people don't see. I mean, I was a child at the beginning of the era when divorce became easier to get.
Sure.
And so, now we see couples that divorce and they think it doesn't impact their children, and it impacts them in subtle ways, especially if we're not seeing the affection. I mean, my daughter, when she was a baby, well, she wasn't a baby, she was probably a toddler, 3-4 years old, and any time my husband and I would be hugging in the kitchen, she would literally try to put herself in between us. It was like, no, this is daddy time. This is, it's like you can get a hug from mommy later, but right now daddy gets a hug.
Oh, and, good for you. That's great.
Yeah, and so, but it's important, and I do think it's almost blasphemy when we say that, because it's like, oh my gosh, put my partner before my children. And this is why I think my husband, now that we're quote unquote empty nesters, we're enjoying it. We're having a grand old time.
Well, you just mentioned something really important, because ultimately your children are going to leave the home.
Hopefully.
And it's going to be you and your partner. What's that going to look and feel like if you have devoted all your time, attention, and energy to your children? It's going to be a struggle.
Right. I talk about it as, they leave the home and you're sitting across the kitchen table and it's like, who are you and what are you doing in my house? I mean, because I have no idea.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very true. And okay, the next item on the 8 elements of intimacy is this playful banter, lightness, laughter. There's so much stress out there in the world that we really need more and more light, playful silliness in our lives. And that's one thing I love about my wife, is that she and I can just act like children with each other, tease each other playfully, and it's a way of deepening our connection.
It is, and you make a good point about teasing playfully, because I know sometimes people, there are certain things that I've had to tell my husband, that over there, that's not something I can be teased about. If you can stay away from that, you can tease me about all these other things and I'm really good. But that area over there, that's not a place where I can be teased, and that's respected. I never had to explain or justify or whatever. It was just like, oh, okay, that's an off-limits area, no problem.
Let me elaborate for a moment. So for me, playful teasing is around sensuality.
Okay.
So it could be planting seeds about what you're going to do with them later on that evening. It could be planting seeds about how you view them, or how hot and sexy they look in whatever outfit they happen to be wearing, or whatever the case is. The playful teasing that I'm referring to is more sensual in nature.
Got it.
And this lightness and laughter is something that's truly important, because if I'm stressed and my wife is stressed, somebody's got to have the presence of mind to want to alleviate the tension. And so she is great at lightening things up, so that it's not always me who initiates that. But one person has to be willing to initiate playfulness, this light banter back and forth, the laughter. Other than that, it's kind of a dull existence.
Yeah, not a whole lot of fun. So I think we're now at the last one.
Yeah, the safety, comfort, and trust. And presence for, if a man is present, it helps bring feelings of safety, comfort, and trust. We have to be comfortable with each other. I remember in my first marriage, I went to Bermuda with my wife at the time, and I think we'd been married for maybe a year. And I got to Bermuda, and it's just me and her on this beach, and I am freaking out. Just the two of us? I don't know if I can handle that. Well, where is everybody?
What are we going to do? What are we going to talk about? Right.
I wasn't comfortable, just the two of us alone, isolated out in the wilderness, so to speak. That comfort factor is enormous. And feeling safe is obviously the ultimate way to higher levels of passion. If you don't feel safe, you're not going to have higher and higher levels of passion.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely impossible.
Yeah. And that leads to the last one, which was the sensuality and sexual activity. All the things we talked about, the affection, the physical touch, the feelings of connectedness and togetherness, the warmth, the deep feelings of being understood and valued, presence, empathy, the lightness and playfulness, the safety factor, all lead to heightened sensuality and greater experiences sexually.
Right. And because, yes, and that's one of the things that when these pieces are missing, and you were very clear at the beginning, if any of this part's missing, it is going to impact this end point. And then people are fighting about sex, and that's not necessarily what they're fighting about, but they're fighting about all the things that are getting in the way of it, which is really important because that's, again, people equate intimacy with sex, and it is so much more than that.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And here's kind of an interesting thing about affairs. Harvard did a follow-up study of over 20 years with men who had left their wives for another woman. At the time, it was just a man-focused thing. The data is about the same for women. The long-term sustainability of that affair partner that ended up being a relationship, they failed 93% of the time. Only 7% of the time did the man end up being long-term with this person they were having the affair with. So do you want to bet on a 93% loser? It looks like the grass is greener out there. It looks like you can feel this sense of connection or lust or whatever this thing is, but over time, if people are not aware of what's required, you're going to get right back to where you were.
Exactly, and that's one of the things. It's like, and that brings me to this point. It's like if it's easier for many people. Now, there are some cases where this is absolutely not true. The marriage has to end. It's not safe. It will never be safe, and people need to get out. But that's not most of the marriages. And even with an affair, if people understand what that was about and the fact that, like you said, you're heading into a much higher failure rate than if you didn't start out that way. But how do couples get into the habit of doing these 8 things if they haven't been doing them? Maybe they've been married 2 years. Maybe they've been married 10 years. Maybe they've been married 20 years. And there is this gap. There is this, sometimes it's a chasm between the two people. How do they start?
Well, one of the most important things that is lacking in a relationship is a vision. How do we want our lives to be together? We often have visions for our kids' education. We have visions of retirement, visions of vacation, visions of building this home and a second home, or whatever the thing, or visions of a career, right? We have this vision of all these things in our lives, but not necessarily a marriage. As I mentioned, in my first marriage, we're married. I'm good. Happily ever after.
Right. Nothing else needs to be done.
Exactly. I had this thought, which was, how do I want to feel when I'm with my wife? And when I talk about vision in my book, it is not so much what do we want to do, it's how do I want to feel when we're together. So I want to feel this deeply connected sense of intimacy and all these 8 elements that I referred to that we've talked about. I want to feel that connection with my wife always. And so that's my vision. And if I want to create that, I have to take responsibility for it. So I need to initiate affection and touch. I need to initiate feelings of closeness and togetherness. I need to initiate warmth and presence and banter and lightness. If I'm not doing that, how am I going to achieve my little vision that I have about the feeling that I want with my wife?
I love that. And it's one of the things I think that gets a lot of couples into trouble is because they want their partner to do it first. And I get that. I really do, because it's scary. If you haven't been close and suddenly you start implementing any of these 8 steps, then it's scary because your partner might look at you as like, what are you doing? And again, this is where good communication, I think, comes in, because I don't know anybody who really wants to be in a relationship where they don't feel valued, where they don't feel like they matter, but to be able to take that step and reach out to their partner. It can be scary.
It can, and I want to piggyback on what you just said, because it can be scary. And I write about this idea of if you're a woman listening to this right now, here's something that you can do to begin to bridge the gap in your intimacy, if there is a gap. You could ask your husband to hold you with a very soft tone of voice. You could go up to him and say, would you please just hold me for a few moments? Now, recognizing he could reject it, recognizing he could say something stupid, recognizing he's not going to be present. He's got one hand on you, one on his phone, and he's looking at his phone, right? You'll know instantly if he's not present. You'll feel it. You'll know. But the moment you do that, you create the possibility of something special. And if you're willing to put yourself out there again and again to do that in different ways, you will build up this power within you that can never be taken away. Your job is to just initiate and to not be lost in whether he accepts it or not. You win when you initiate.
Right, and the reverse is true as well when the husband wants to become closer. And I do need, speaking as a woman, I do need for men to understand that how they, especially if there is an intimacy gap, a lot of the initiation originally needs to start around non-sexual things, because for a lot of women, they're hypersensitive to, well, all he wants is sex. So I would just caution that doing some of the other things, and I do like that you moved, the actual sexuality down to the bottom of the list, because that's almost like the culmination of all these things, as opposed to where a lot of men feel comfortable starting there. And that's not a slam on guys. My husband has just went male bashing, pay up. I'm not bashing men. I'm really not.
Actually, from my perspective, that's a great point. I often tell couples who have not been sexually active for years that it's not about sex. Sex will be a natural outcome in its own pace and time if you are doing these elements of intimacy. You will want to have sex. Desire will build. But That's not the focus. The focus is simply on building and reconnecting with each other, building these feelings of closeness.
Absolutely. And, we could talk about this for the rest of the afternoon, but I want to give you the opportunity to tell the listeners where they can get more information about how to rebuild intimacy in their lives.
Well, they could come to my website, which is the number 90minutemarriagemiracle.com. And if they reference your show, I will send them a free ebook version of my book, The 90-Minute Marriage Miracle.
Well, terrific. So, the truth is you really don't have to settle for a less than marriage, although many people do. And if you are one of them, I genuinely and lovingly want to know why. It doesn't need to take a lot of time or money to get the marriage that you want and deserve. And it doesn't even need your partner's buy-in, as you just heard, at least not in the beginning. But what it takes is you stepping up and reaching out, and I guarantee that it is an investment that will pay off each and every day.
So I hope that one of the things that you do is to continue listening to this show. And until next week, stay loving.